Hey there. Hey everybody, this is Brenton from Forza Tuning and Performance coming to you with a new video. Today's video is going to be mostly based on the Trackhawk. And I know we've done a couple other videos on Trackhawks, but I wanted to touch base on a video pertaining to basically the questions that we get asked frequently about the Trackhawk. You know, what is a Jeep Trackhawk? What are the differences between a Jeep Trackhawk and the SRT8 Jeep Grand Cherokee? Some specific technical questions as far as the suspension and traction control systems on a Trackhawk versus the SRT8 or any other SUV for that matter. Specifically the Bilstein active dampening suspension and the Select Track traction control system. Is the Jeep Trackhawk the fastest production SUV? So we're going to touch base on that, whether it is, and we're going to give you some comparisons. The Jeep Trackhawk compared to some of the other fastest SUVs in production today, which would be, we'll name a few like the Lamborghini Urus, which has just come out recently, the Bentley Bentayga, which is also a very fast, very powerful SUV. So we'll do a few comparisons and a few stats compared to the Trackhawk so you'll get a kind of an idea of where it stands compared to those SUVs. And then probably last but not least, is the Trackhawk faster than the Hellcat? We get that question routinely, and we'll kind of touch base on some different stats between the two vehicles. So the first thing we'll go over is what is a Jeep Trackhawk. The Jeep Trackhawk is a Jeep Grand Cherokee with the Hellcat 6.2 liter supercharged V8 HEMI engine as the power plant. Chrysler Corporation has spent a lot of time developing this vehicle. They already had the Jeep Grand Cherokee platform, obviously, but when they wanted to take the 707 horsepower Hellcat engine and put it in an all-wheel drive vehicle, nothing that the Jeep previously had was strong enough to hold that much power. So they went through and reverse engineered and redesigned basically the entire platform for that engine to be in that vehicle reliably. Obviously, it had the Hellcat engine. Everybody knows it was 707 horsepower. The torque was about 5 pounds less than the Trackhawk, so it's 645 instead of 650. That's because of slight differences in the air intake system and the exhaust system, just because what they needed to fit in that particular chassis. The Trackhawk weighs about 5,300 pounds, very similar in weight to the Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT8. It has a towing capacity of 7,200 pounds. It does not get good gas mileage, obviously. It's 11 in the city and 13 on the highway. But nobody's buying a Trackhawk for gas mileage, obviously. And also the Jeep Trackhawk, a lot of people ask, what does it cost? It is just shy of $90,000. It is only available in one trim package, and it is the most expensive Jeep that has ever been released. Okay, so we already mentioned the Jeep Trackhawk compared to the SRT8. So while we're talking about that, let's just go into a few key differences between the two. Cosmetically, if you're strictly looking on the outside of the vehicle, there is not a whole lot of differences. They use the same hood. The body is obviously the same, but there are a few key features if you want to know how to tell the two apart, or if you see one out and you don't know if it's a Trackhawk or not. Let's just start out with the most obvious is the badging. It's not a lot, it's very subtle. On the back tailgate, there's a Trackhawk badge, and on each door, there is a badge underneath that says supercharged. A lot of people remove these. They like the car debadged, so without these two significant key factors, it's very hard to tell the difference between the two. Exhaust tips. The SRT8 had the just dual exhaust tips, so one on each side, and the Trackhawk has a quad tip configuration, so it's two on each side. That's a little bit more easy to tell. Another easy way to tell, aside from the badging, is every Trackhawk is featured with Brembo yellow calipers. It has 6 piston calipers in the front, 4 piston in the back. If you see a Jeep Grand Cherokee and it has yellow calipers, it is definitely a Trackhawk unless somebody's powder coated the SRT8 calipers to match it. Another key difference between the SRT8 Jeep and the Trackhawk is the Trackhawk has no front fog lights. They didn't just do that just for a cosmetic difference or anything, it's actual functionality. The Trackhawk obviously it has a supercharger on it, and they need a much larger supply of cool air to feed the supercharger. So what they did on the left-hand side of the vehicle is that's actually a functional air inlet for the air box for the supercharger. Trackhawk has additional oil coolers, transmission coolers, everything else. So the right side provided a good air inlet for some additional coolers that the Trackhawk needed. The last differences between the two, and most people can't even see this unless you're literally gonna get a tape measure out, but the Trackhawk sits an inch lower to the ground. It's very hard to see this in a parking lot. Almost they have to be side by side. And it's just because what we talked based on earlier, the Trackhawk has the Bilstein active dampening and the Select Track traction control system. So the entire suspension system is different from the ground up on the Trackhawk. So those are some key differences between the SRT8 Jeep Grand Cherokee and the Trackhawk. We talked about aesthetic differences, okay? So as far as mechanical differences, they are vastly different. The SRT8G features the 6.4 liter naturally aspirated Hemi. It has a different transmission, a different transfer case, different differentials, different drive shaft, different axles. The cooling system on both, not only for just the engine, like the engine cooling system, but the oil, transmission fluid, those are all different. The suspension is totally different. The engine management is totally different. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because even though they look very similar, they are drastically different vehicles. A lot of people will ask, you know, hey, I have an SRT8 Grand Cherokee and I want to just put a blower on it and make it faster than a Trackhawk. The Trackhawk is much more than a supercharger. Chrysler literally redesigned this from the ground up. Every component on the Trackhawk is drastically stronger than any other Jeep that's ever been released. You can't just put a supercharger on an SRT8 and make it beat a Trackhawk. They are so remarkably different. And the fact that they look cosmetically the same, I think that gives most people the illusion that they're pretty close. There was also some people in the beginning that thought the price tag was too high. That's strictly opinion based. In my opinion, you know, the Trackhawk is engineered far superior. There's a lot more money put into it. You couldn't take the price difference between the two and make the SRT8 what the Trackhawk is on your own. So in my opinion, based off that, I think the Trackhawk is well worth the money and they did not overprice it and they put it at a really good price point. Okay, I mentioned earlier about the suspension and traction control systems being different between the SRT8 and the Trackhawk. So let's just talk about the specific system on the Trackhawk. It has what's called a select track traction control system, and it works in conjunction with the Bilstein active dampening suspension system. On the center console, you have some selections to make, and it's auto, sport, track, snow, and tow. Okay, so a lot of people, we get quite, what are the differences between the two? What happens when you select the different modes? So let me just go through those one by one and kind of give you all a brief description of what changes when you select those different things. So before we talk about the different modes, let me just make sure that everybody knows that the Trackhawk is full-time all-wheel drive. There is no two-wheel drive option and everything. So the different modes kind of differentiate the torque split between the front and rear differentials. So in auto mode, that is the most conservative setting. It defaults to any driving condition, and it is a 40-60 torque split, meaning 40% of the torque is delivered to the front differential, 60% to the rear differential. The next selection you can choose is sport. That does a 35-65 torque split, 35% front, 65% rear. The shift times are about 50% faster than the auto mode. The suspension and everything is more optimized for a more sporty feel, kind of like a more based on like a sports car feel compared to the typical SUV feel. The next one is track. Track is a 30-70 torque split, 30% front, 70% rear. The shift points are 68% faster than the auto mode, which equates to about 160 millisecond shifts, which is very, very fast. The suspension, the steering, the four-wheel drive is all optimized for a full track performance feel. Next up, you have tow. Like I said, the Trackhawk has a 7,200 pound towing capacity, and it does a 60-40 torque split. What it also does is modify the suspension. Instead of going for a performance, feel or anything, it adjusts the suspension for the load on the back of the vehicle to try to keep the vehicle level under like heavy loads or pulling. It also optimizes the torque delivery off the line, so it provides more torque off the line to get the heavy load moving. The last one is snow, which is pretty self-explanatory. It has an actual 50-50 torque split, and it actually reduces the engine power because obviously 707 horsepower is not conducive to getting traction in snow, so it defaults to lower power setting. And it also optimizes every single system in the truck to maximize traction. Another question we get asked is the Jeep Trackhawk the fastest SUV in production today? There's a few different variables to answer that question accurately. There's different measures of speed, whether it's top speed or 0 to 60. So what I want to do is just give a few comparisons to some of the, I'm going to say the top 3 fastest vehicles. We'll use the Jeep Trackhawk and let's say the Lamborghini Urus and Bentley Bentayga. Those are 2 that I'm familiar with. The Trackhawk has the most horsepower, 707. The Lamborghini Urus would be second at about 640, 641. And the Bentley Bentayga, for this purposes, we're just going to use the higher option Bentayga with the W12 twin turbo engine, and it's 600 horsepower. So we see the Trackhawk as the king of horsepower. Let's go top speed. Where the Bentley Bentayga was the lowest horsepower, it takes first place in top speed. It is 190 miles an hour, very fast for an SUV. Second would be the Lamborghini Urus at a very close 189 miles an hour. And the Trackhawk is 180 miles an hour. Between the fastest and the slowest, we're talking 10 miles an hour, speeds of almost 200 miles an hour. So it's still very, very close. So if you're judging it off top speed, the award would have to go to the Bentley Bentayga. And a lot of people say that's the fastest SUV strictly because of the top speed. 0 to 60 time. Jeep Trackhawk, 3.5 seconds, okay, which is number one. The Lamborghini Urus is a very close second at 3.6, so we're talking 1/10 of a second faster. And the Bentley Bentayga, which has the fastest top speed, is the slowest at 0 to 60, and it's a 3.9 seconds. So now that we had those 0 to 60 times, let me touch base just a real quick second. This is a Stage 4R Trackhawk, and this has a 0 to 60 time of 2.4 seconds. Then drastically faster than either the Lamborghini Urus or the Bentley Bentayga. And we'll touch on one other point that I kind of think is important. Everybody gets hung up on horsepower, acceleration, which is very important. Obviously, everybody cares about that. To judge the true measure of performance for a vehicle, let's talk a little bit about braking time, which is measured from 60 mile an hour to 0 in feet. So before we get into this is not a performance statistics that is commonly used as 0 to 60. So not as many people know, like, well, what's good or what's bad. Very ultra high-end sports cars like a Lamborghini Aventador, a Lotus Evora, those would have braking times from 60 to 0 of sub 100 feet. So to give you a measure, the top vehicles out there with crazy brakes and lightweight and everything else, that's what you know, kind of a bar to be set by. So obviously an SUV is going to be heavier. It's just not going to compete as far as that. But that's not to say that these don't come very close. So a Lamborghini Urus would be top, and it is 60 miles an hour to 0 in about 108 feet, which is remarkable for an SUV. The Trackhawk is also very, very close. So the Trackhawk does it in 114 feet. So it's very close to on par with the Lamborghini, and both these are very close. If you lined it up, you're talking 8 to 14 feet difference between one of the top vehicles in the world. I did not mention the Bentley Bentayga 60 to 0 times, mostly because it's unknown. I couldn't, you know, I don't know of anybody that's ever tested it, and Bentley doesn't post these times, in my opinion, probably because they're not very good, and probably because the vehicle weighs like 7,200 pounds versus the Trackhawk of 5,300. There's no way with that kind of mass that it could stop in nearly the shorter distance, so they probably just maybe accidentally omitted that information. We also get asked, is the Jeep Trackhawk faster than a Hellcat? No, it's not. It's very, very close, but the Trackhawk weighs 5,300 pounds and the Hellcat weighs 4,400 pounds. The Hellcat, even though it's not the most aerodynamic in design, the Trackhawk is shaped like a brick. So it's got some things fighting against it, but they're two totally different things. One is an SUV, one is a car. So it's a little bit hard. It's not an equal comparison, but to give you some comparisons, we'll talk about a few different things. So the first thing, we'll go over quarter mile times. That's something everybody asks. And I want to, before we even get into this, these are the figures that Dodge and Jeep post. Okay, so this can get into, you know, my buddy did this at the track and he didn't do this at the track. So we're just going to stick with figures that the car manufacturers release. So a Trackhawk is a quarter mile of 11.6, and a regular Hellcat, the 707 horsepower version, so we're not talking about a wide body and we're not talking about a red eye or anything like that. So a regular Hellcat is 11.4 quarter mile. So the Hellcat is 0.2 of a second faster. Top speed, Trackhawk 180 miles an hour. Hellcat 199. Okay, this is clearly because the aerodynamic advantage that the Hellcat has over the Trackhawk. Once you get into faster and faster speeds, aerodynamics comes into play more and more and more. There's no way that an SUV shaped like that can compare it to a car just because of the physics of aerodynamics. So the last one, 0 to 60 time. This is pretty close. The Trackhawk is 3.5 seconds, 0 to 60 time, and the Hellcat is 3.4. This is largely due to the Trackhawk being all-wheel drive versus the Hellcat. Obviously, they always have traction issues. So they're very close as far as that. So in a quarter mile time or top speed, as the speed increases, the Hellcat would gain further and further on the Trackhawk. Okay, so hopefully this video answers some questions you'll have. I know it's the questions we get asked a lot. That's the point of this video. And obviously we do performance packages on a variety of different cars, including Trackhawks. I try to give, you know, kind of implement a few different statistics off what our Stage 4 Trackhawk did compare these two. But I feel like a lot that's been released a lot, you know, previous videos. Another thing I want to touch base again, I really appreciate all the positive comments and the subscribers, and I just want to tell you, our whole team here really appreciates that. There's so much work that goes into these videos behind the scenes. They're filming and setting up and editing and really working hard to make these videos good for you all. So I just want to say thank you. When you all leave a positive comment, it makes all the work worthwhile. Okay, that pretty much sums it up for this week's video. I hope y'all liked it. If you have any suggestions for future videos or positive feedback, please feel free to comment and give us, let us know what you want to see. If you like the videos and you want to be notified as soon as we release these videos, make sure you click on the bell next to the subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date on all the videos released as soon as they hit YouTube. Thanks again, and see you guys next week.